This is the devastating effects humans have had on animals. Animals have been greatly impacted by human rule, making them have to adapt in order to live in areas with human rule. Most of this activity has been since around 1760, which was the start of the Industrial Revolution in Britain. Andrew Blokin, who attended the University of Notre Dame and the University of Virginia, says, one negative byproduct of industrialization is environmental pollution that can adversely impact human health. When companies do not pay for the environmental damage they cause, or when these harms are not captured in pricing, this is considered a negative externality. This cost is placed on human society in the form of deforestation, extinction of species, widespread pollution, excessive waste, and other forms of environmental degradation. This quote says industrialization causes pollution, but when the harms are not paid for, it causes burden on things like deforestation and the extinction of species. Even with this very small amount of time humans have been on Earth, they have conquered and destroyed it in a way that leads animals to either adapt to humans or die. Homo sapiens, also known as humans, have been living on Earth for around 300,000 years. The Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History says, the species that you and all other living human beings belong on this planet to is Homo sapiens. During a time of dramatic climate change 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens evolved in Africa. Like other early humans that were living at this time, they gathered and hunted food and evolved behaviors that helped them respond to the challenges of survival in unstable environments. This amount of time is very tiny compared to when life was first on Earth, which was around 3.7 billion years ago. An easier way to see this is to imagine those 3.7 billion years as the 1 yard line on a football field to the other 0 yard line. That's 300 feet in length. If you put the time humans covered on this football field, it would account for about a third of an inch. Even with this tiny amount of time, humans have conquered about every part of the Earth, have caused plastic pollution in every part of the world, and released billions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere, causing global warming and hurting animals all around the globe. A.P. Balyante, who is part of the Department of Ecosystem and Conservation Sciences, and attended the University of Missouri and the University of Montana, says in a peer-reviewed article, since 1959, approximately 350 billion tons of carbon have been emitted by humans to the atmosphere, of which about 55% has moved into the land and oceans. Although humans have been living for around 300,000 years, most of this pollution and emissions is from very recent human activity. Humans have made irreversible damage to the Earth, even with this tiny amount of time that they have been on Earth. Many animals that live in cities have adapted and changed to survive in human environments. For example, rats in cities have adapted to have teeth that make it easier to eat human food and scraps. Eric Bender, who is an Associate Director for Communications and Public Affairs at Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research and a founding editor-in-chief at MIT, says, Munchie Stout's lab has evidence that natural selection is changing the skulls of the rats such that they have longer noses and shorter sets of teeth. These might be adaptations to colder environments and a diet of human leftovers, respectively, the scientists have speculated. Similar changes in teeth have been spotted in urban white-footed mice. So this might be a general phenom in rodent cities. Munchie Stout says, due to the rats living in the human-conquered environments, they have to adapt, and the rats in the city adapted to eat human food and scraps easier. Another examples of animals adapting to cities is squirrels in Manhattan. They use power lines and buildings to cross over roads, and think of power lines and buildings as cliff faces and trees. These animals didn't adapt to eat human food, but they adapted to use human-made structures for movement. Another human-made environment that animals have adapted to live in is Chernobyl. This is a radioactive area formed because a nuclear power plant exploded, causing radiation. Thomas Sumner, who studied as a graduate student in the University of California and studied physics at the University of California, says, birds found in areas with higher radiation levels had more antioxidants and better overall body condition. Team reports online this week in Functional Ecology. This is the first known example of wild animals adapting to chronic radiation exposure, the researchers say. Even in environments like Chernobyl, with no humans, animals struggle to adapt to human-made disasters and destruction. One counter that's brought up is, if animals are affected in areas only with humans, then environments without humans, like Antarctica, are not affected by humans. In Antarctica, animals adapt, just not to humans. They adapt to cold temperatures. The Australian Antarctic Program says emperor penguins have special neighbor chambers which recover heat lost through breathing. They also have closely aligned veins and arteries. These adaptations enable emperor penguins to recycle their own body heat. Animals in Antarctica, like penguins, have adapted to the cold over the past years with things like blubber and the special nasal chambers that these penguins have. Although true, Antarctic animals do not have to adapt to human structures due to it being basically inhabited by humans, they still have to adapt to things like microplastic and global warming due to them affecting the entire globe. Alex R. Alves, who is a PhD candidate in environmental science, says in a peer-reviewed article, we collected freshly fallen snow samples from the Ross Island region of Antarctica in late 2019 and analyzed them to quantify the presence and abundance of microplastics. Samples were collected close to 2 scientific stations from 13 field sites up to 20 kilometers from the research stations. We identified polymer composition using micro-Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy and analyzed air mass back trajectories to identify the potential origins of sampled air masses. Even though microplastics were made many miles away from Antarctica, it doesn't stop them from getting there. Antarctica is usually unaffected by human things like radiation, but microplastics can travel much easier there because they can travel through rain and oceans. Another thing animals in Antarctica are affected by is global warming, which is an effect by the billions of tons of carbon produced by humans. Michael Oppenheimer, who is the director of the Center for Policy Research on Energy and the Environment, is the author of over 200 articles published in professional journals. This is in a peer-reviewed article. Generically, there are 3 causes of this trend. The ocean, like any heated fluid, expands as the world warms. Mountain glaciers are also warming and melting, adding additional water to the ocean, and likewise, the major sheets on Greenland and Antarctica are disintegrating gradually, especially after warmer peripheries. Global warming causes the ice sheets in Antarctica to disintegrate. This destroys the ground that the animals live on and also affects the entire ecosystems there. In conclusion, us humans have had a massive effect on animals, making them adjust and switch up their ways in order to survive in environments dominated by humans. Even without our direct influence, animals are still feeling the effects of what we do, with things like microplastic and global warming. Even though we haven't been around for long, we've done permanent damage to the planet and destroyed ecosystems. However, the fact that animals are able to adjust to this pressure, like city rats eating human food or squirrels using man-made structures to move around, this shows the resilience that animals have.
Terrific. I've got 2 questions for you, Josh, and then we'll wrap this up. So the first question is, how did your research question evolve as you moved through the process?
So originally it was just about how humans and animals have adapted to live, but I realized that doesn't really have a counterclaim and was kind of just a bad question, so I changed it to the one I have now, which is how humans have forced animals to adapt.
Okay, excellent. And then as a follow-up to that, what additional questions emerged as you went through the research process?
So one of the questions I had is how are we going to fix this? Because it was how are we going to fix this? And this is important because without animals, living for humans is very difficult, and you just need animals to live.
Okay, terrific.